The wind screamed through the tall pines, rattling the shutters of a lone cabin tucked deep in the wilderness. Snowflakes spun sideways in the icy gusts, blanketing the ground in silence. From the trees emerged a hunched figure, a woman, no more than 30, wrapped in a torn, oversized coat. Her breath puffed in frantic clouds as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her boots worn and soaked. She spotted the dim flicker of firelight through the cabin's frost-glazed window and crept closer. With trembling hands, she tried the door, unlocked. She slipped inside like a ghost. The warmth hit her like a wave. Crackling logs burned in the hearth, casting orange light over shelves cluttered with old tools, books, and jars of preserves. She moved quickly but quietly, glancing around like a hunted animal. Her fingers grabbed a can of beans, then a hunting knife from the wall, then a folded wool blanket. She moved toward the coat hung by the door. Then, a voice from the shadows. "If you're cold," it said gently, "take the coat too." She froze, her hand on the fabric. Her eyes darted toward the hearth. In the rocker beside it sat a man, broad-shouldered, bearded, calm. He hadn't moved. Just watched her with eyes neither angry nor afraid. "I don't want trouble," she stammered. "You look like you've already had plenty," he replied. "I'm not gonna stop you. But if you're hungry, there's stew on the stove." She stood frozen, her instincts screaming to run, but something in his voice, his stillness, made her stay. The storm raged outside, but inside, something unexpected had taken root, the start of trust. The woman stood by the door, half draped in the wool blanket, her fingers still curled around the knife's handle. The stew simmered quietly on the old iron stove, filling the room with the rich scent of venison and herbs. The mountain man didn't move from his chair. He just gestured toward the stool across from him with a tilt of his head. "You're safe here. Sit a while, warm up." She eyed him, skeptical. "Why are you being nice to me? I just broke in." He shrugged. "You look cold, hungry, and tired. That's enough reason." She hesitated, then slowly crossed the room and sat, still tense, coiled like a spring. He stood, moved to the stove, and ladled steaming stew into a tin bowl, placing it in front of her with a spoon. Then he sat back down without a word. She stared at the food for a long moment before finally eating, slowly at first, then with desperation. As she ate, he reached for a wooden box near the hearth and began whittling a small piece of pine. "You from the city?" he asked casually. She nodded. "Ran into trouble. Needed to disappear." He nodded, as if that explained everything. "Happens." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the scrape of her spoon. "Why didn't you stop me?" she asked finally. "Or kick me out?" His eyes met hers. "Because sometimes folks don't need punishment. They need a place to rest." She looked away, hiding the sting of tears behind her hair. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not in years. He leaned back and said, softly, "Stay for one night. No strings. Let the storm pass." And somehow, she found herself nodding. The storm had quieted, but the fire still burned. Snow tapped softly against the windows now, more whisper than roar. The woman sat curled in the same spot, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a half-empty mug of tea cradled in her hands. Her wet boots sat by the fire, steaming gently. The mountain man, still in his flannel shirt and worn jeans, sat across from her, carving a small wooden bird. His hands moved with quiet purpose, steady and practiced. She finally spoke. "You live out here alone?" "Most of the time," he said without looking up. "Some years pass without seeing anyone but deer and wind." She gave a short laugh, dry and bitter. "Sounds like a dream. Or a punishment." "Sometimes it's both," he said, glancing at her now. She looked into the fire. "I stole from the wrong man. Thought I was clever. Turns out he was worse than I ever imagined. I ran. I've been running since. People who run usually aren't the worst ones, he said. Silence. Then she asked, almost a whisper, why didn't you call the cops? He put the carving knife down. Because I don't trust them to know the difference between a thief and someone who's just trying to survive. She blinked, unsure how to respond. The warmth of the fire pressed against her cold, guarded heart. He stood and walked to a shelf, pulling down an old photo, him, years younger, with a woman and a child. They're gone, he said softly. So now I let the wind bring in whoever it wants. And I don't ask why. She met his eyes, her own softer now. What if I'm trouble? He smiled faintly. Then I guess I'll deal with it. Tomorrow. And for the first time in months, she felt the weight in her chest lift. Just a little. The first light of day crept over the treetops, casting a soft blue hue across the blanket of snow. Everything was still. The world looked untouched, fresh, silent, except for the faint sound of boots crunching lightly on the frost. Wrapped in the wool blanket, the woman stepped outside the cabin and closed the door behind her as quietly as she could. Her backpack, what little she had, was slung over her shoulder. The snow came up to her calves, but she didn't look back. Just kept walking toward the trees, toward the road, toward nowhere. She'd barely gone 20 feet when. You leaving already? She froze. The mountain man stood to the side of the cabin, splitting wood with smooth, practiced swings. He hadn't looked up. She cleared her throat. I thought I'd go before I wore out my welcome. He let the axe rest against the stump, finally turning to her. You didn't. She looked away, trying not to let his kindness disarm her. You don't know me. You should have locked the door. I did, he said with a half smile. You came in anyway. Silence stretched between them. She shifted on her feet. You don't want me here. I didn't say that, he replied. I said you could stay one night. But the storm's not done. Not really. He gestured to the gray sky above. More snow was coming. She hesitated. The woods behind her suddenly looked colder. Sharper. You want me to stay? He shrugged. Up to you. I've got coffee on. And a second mug. She stared at him for a long moment, then let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I'll stay, she said, barely audible. He nodded. One more night. But they both knew she meant more than that. The snow had slowed to a light dusting, dancing gently in the air like ash from the chimney smoke. The world was quiet, peaceful in a way she had almost forgotten existed. She sat on the cabin's porch steps, wrapped in a worn flannel shirt over the wool blanket, a steaming mug of coffee cupped in her hands. Beside her, the mountain man sat with his boots propped on the railing, silently watching the sun sink behind the ridge. The sky was streaked with gold and rose, the trees bathed in warm light. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't need to. I should feel restless, she said eventually. Like I need to move. Keep running. But, he asked, still watching the trees. But I don't, she said. Her voice was calm now, not defensive, not afraid. Not here. He nodded, thoughtful. Funny thing about the mountains. They let you hear yourself for the first time. She turned to look at him. What if I stayed? He met her eyes, not surprised. Then I'd have to make more stew, he said with a small smile. And maybe finally fix the second room. She laughed, genuinely this time, and looked back out at the horizon. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted. You're someone who made it through the storm, he said. That's a start. She let the silence settle again, this time warm and easy. The kind that didn't need filling. Then, softly, she said, okay. He didn't say anything, just nodded and passed her another blanket. And as the sun disappeared and the cold crept in, two strangers who weren't strangers anymore sat together on a porch in the middle of nowhere, no longer running, no longer hiding. Just, beginning.